Hey everybody, welcome. How are you all? Good. Come in if you're arriving. There's more seats. There's some seats inside and more seats in the back too if you want to grab extra chairs that are in the back. Glad to have a good crowd on a Thursday night in Tucson. Thanks for being here. My name's Tyler. I work here as the director at the Poetry Center. Lovely to have a big crowd here for Saretta Morgan, who we're thrilled to welcome back to Tucson and to read from her newest work and from this wonderful book, Alt Nature. I wanted to just quickly give you guys a couple of updates on some things that are happening next at the Poetry Center so everybody has some context. First thing to say is that there's a second event that's connected to this one tonight that's happening tomorrow night, and that's going to be at 6 o'clock at the Museum of Contemporary Art here in Tucson, so MoCA Tucson. Free event, 6 o'clock, and it will be a section of this book that will bring in four voices to sort of perform in a kind of polyphonic way that section of the book, so a performative aspect of it. And the four voices that you'll hear, Amber Morningstar Byers will be here to read, Raquel Gutierrez will be here to read, Sasha Hawkins, and Coco Montellano. It's going to be great. So choose to come again tomorrow night, 6 o'clock, MoCA Tucson, for the next part of what you'll hear tonight. And we hope you guys will come and join us. Next at the center on April 4th, so back here on a Thursday night next week, will be a reading called The Place Where Clouds Are Formed. And it's a reading that's connected to an exhibit that's launching at the Poetry Center that will be installed relatively soon, but the official launch date is the 4th as well. So you can come a little bit early and enjoy the exhibit, and then come back for the reading, or stay for the reading that'll be at 7 o'clock. So the center will be open the whole time up until the reading starts and a little bit after the reading as well to enjoy that exhibit. And that's going to feature the poets Ofelia Zepeda, Amber Lee Ortega, and Sukchuvak Fulwider. We're really excited about that. That's a collaborative exhibit that's happening over our space here at the Poetry Center and also at the Center for Creative Photography. And it will be up throughout the rest of the spring. And it's a beautiful exhibit that kind of tells this particular story about experiences of the borderlands. It's perhaps very different from what we sometimes get in the national media. We're really pleased with that and excited about it. So come back and check that out and join us. April 11th, if you've been following along in our calendar, we were to have a visit from the Mexican novelist Brenda Lozano, and that has unfortunately needed to be postponed. And it's for a good reason. Brenda has a chance through her publisher to go do a tour of Spain as part of the work that's happening with that book. We're going to postpone that event that would happen here until August 29th. So Brenda's still coming, just slightly later. And if you were planning to come to that, we hope to see you come back in August when she'll be here. And then the last thing to say is something that's very, very new and we'll soon have on our website. And some of you, how many of you know about the mural project happening on Speedway Boulevard? Some of you do. Okay, good. If you don't know about it, I'm excited to just give you a quick context for it. There are 6 new murals on the sort of Speedway corridor through campus that are all done by 6 different muralists through the Alley Cat Muralist Collective. And they feature the work taking their inspiration from the poetry of 6 different poets. And so those murals are now completed. They're all on Speedway, and we're going to have an event on April 23rd to launch those murals. That's going to be at 5 o'clock here at the Poetry Center, and this event will be on our website soon. And we're going to meet here, we'll hear a little bit about the project, hear from some of the participants. There will be ice cream and vegan options. And then it will be a kind of self-paced walking or rolling experience of going to see the art in different spaces on Speedway just outside, and we'll circle back to the Poetry Center at the end. They're really beautiful. And so if you're driving along Speedway and you see beautiful things to the left or to the right, that's probably what's happening. These great murals based on poets and poems. It's my pleasure to welcome up a great friend of the Poetry Center, Mariana Coles-Curtis, who's going to introduce Saretta Morgan. Mariana is a volunteer here at the Poetry Center, works in our free time program, and has collaborated with us in different ways. A great friend and a great gift that they're here to help introduce tonight, Saretta. They're a poet and an activist. Their work can be found in Yes Poetry, Hunger Mountain, Sundog Lit, and in other places. Please help me welcome Mariana Coles-Curtis.
Hey. Yesterday, Saretta gave a workshop on reading, and much of it was thinking about what it means to have a body which reads. So I thought I would begin with 2 notes I wrote in my journal as I read Alt Nature, Saretta Morgan's debut poetry collection. The notes mark moments of intrusion, conversation with the militarized world and the natural world, so fitting while reading Alt Nature. 1. Reading Saretta's book in the backyard. A huge, slow Air Force jet, a carrier, comes overhead loud and close, and I watch its belly, cannot read a word as it passes. The normal of our living under. House shaking, car alarms set off. I wonder at the others who will see its underbelly, who see its underbellies, who see underbellies like it right now. 2. An insect just pooped a tiny mustard-colored feces onto page 14 of Saretta's book. In my attempt to remove it, I smear it into a triangular shape that looks like a moth or a bird diving towards the earth. I met Saretta through visitation we were both doing at the Eloy Immigrant Detention Center. Saretta's community work also includes Phoenix No More Deaths and About Face, Veterans Against War. The political work and its context infuse Saretta's writing. But I don't want to reduce Alt Nature to its political context, or maybe I don't want to reduce political context to political issues. In Alt Nature, border militarization, mass incarceration, racialized capitalism are all a part of the fabric and the landscapes the words traverse. And the wounds that these systems inflict are present and visible on the land and on the bodies who inhabit and move across the land. But nothing is separable. It is the fullness of the fabric which she confronts, and not the individual issues on their own. Alt Nature enters landscapes and listens, touches, inhabits. In an act of love, it offers words to the landscapes, even as it understands that language itself obstructs our abilities to see and articulate what is happening in the field to which we are given. In Alt Nature, Saretta Morgan listens with a wild attention, past, below, and beyond what is made legible by languages of subordination. Her attention is careful, holding the wounds, the stitches. She writes, I rest my head on the frame of a burning question. Inside of Alt Nature, we encounter a deeply animate world, a world which can pus, which can bleed and wound precisely because it is alive and struggling to stay that way. From this presence, Saretta dares a polyvocal we. She attends to and extends the possibility of collectivity inside of the fragmentation and violence of our world. It is a most generous of possibilities, and I am deeply grateful for this book. Saretta Morgan has received support from the Jerome Foundation, Arizona Commission on the Arts, Tucson MoCA, Tomas Cross-Cultural Organization, Virginia G. Piper Center for Creative Writing, and elsewhere. She has been an artist in residence at the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council, Headland Center for the Arts, the Center for African American Poetry and Poetics, and Oak Spring Garden Foundation. She has published the chapbooks Room for a Counter Interior, Portable Press at Yo-Yo Labs, and Feeling Upon Arrival, Ugly Duckling. Alt Nature, out from Coffee House Press, is her first full-length collection. It is an honor to introduce Saretta Morgan.
Thank you, Mariana. The honor is mine. And I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you, everyone. It means a lot for me, for Alt Nature, to live here. I went through so many experiences with this book. It didn't even feel like writing it sometimes. It was like it was just hanging out with me like all the time in the desert, and I'm really glad for it to be back. I want to say before I start reading, so 50% of the proceeds from the book goes to No More Deaths Phoenix. There's also payment information for No More Deaths Phoenix at the table if you just want to give a donation to the organization and not buy the book. Also, I have these really lovely mini broadsides of the epigraph from the book, and if you make a donation and show me that you've done so, I'll be happy to give you one. Oh my goodness, excuse me. I also want to say thank you to Tyler and the Poetry Center, and very big thank you to Diana Delgado, the former literary director here at Poetry Center, who invited me to read before she moved on last spring, I think it was. I'm going to start by reading the epigraph. I want to wake every morning into love, where love is the question of how I'm going to help you get free, where that means whatever it needs to mean. And beneath that, there's a second epigraph, which I wrote in just for my personal copy, from an essay by the writer Fargo Nisenbaki and his piece, Notes on Craft, Writing in the Hour of Genocide. It's an essay that begins with a question. What does Palestine require of us as writers writing in English from within the imperial core in this moment of genocide? I usually don't read these also, but I will today because I have so much time. The essay is organized in sections, and I've written all the section headings down, and so I'm going to read those too. 1, craft is a machine built to produce and reproduce ethical failures. It is a counter-revolutionary machine. 2, to write in solidarity with Palestine is to write amidst the long middle of revolution. 3, the long middle is the state of dailiness, oppression so pervasive as to form an atmosphere we move through. 4, we must ask, what does this require of us then, to write amidst the long middle of Intifada? What might it mean for how we approach the page as a front of the long war? 5, the facilitation of this genocide is contingent upon the great discursive and material weapon of the West, the ontological categories of terrorist and terrorism. 6, we should betray craft by replacing it with political thought. 7, the craft of the long Intifada is made and remade each day by resistance. First, with a statement from Aimé Césaire. We had very good reason to believe that the authorities were lying, were not omnipresent, which meant the authorities would at some moment arrive, the thing we knew, to see clearly and to think clearly, that is, dangerously, and to answer clearly the innocent first question. And still, we carried concealed on the highways. We hushed the horses' mouths. We put our heads to the horses' mouths so we wouldn't be lonely. That's the shortest poem in the book. Most of them are very long. I'm going to read a long one right now, which is a love poem that I wrote over the course of 5 years. And by the end of those 5 years, the relationship had changed form, but it remains, in my mind, a love poem about the difficulties of practicing love with another person and all the ways the world imposes on that. Dearthlight. Now, in coming between one desert and another, I recognize the edges parting and clear. I dip my hand into the bath, over your hair. I ask you not to shave. I ask, open the error, and skin blades open the river, and your great eye opens over a ruined field. From here, geography extends a labored pulse. More music, palmed casings. This love story, a horse still drunk from war where I am the incredible absence of her jaw. A soft pink gaining. You say, dearth is no name for a horse. Here, how she rises from every pussing wound. The officers gouge jasper eyes from the mud. I love you. Dearth, irrational, makes empty the valley, from elongated shadows, pulp of her desire. When this happens, we must love ourselves fiercely, the ancestors and lost humans declared. The human who was wearing the hat of a particular sports team, the human who dropped their hair comb, the human who thought she would reach Utah by Tuesday. Only deserts witness the slow, and complete life of water, a story of chassis and foraged box springs. The one sound offered wandering night without horizon, each exceeds its genre while remaining truly intact. This epic has no hero but flesh, which defies imagination. The carrion large bird's fear, ambulant and calling your name. Foregrounding and comments for what hinges beyond a thorough wound. Likely to suffer, my gift stumbles graphed with sores. Bring me the officer's music. Bring me the landscape gouged from your eyes. Low basin flora, verdant, inching vertebral ache, a warm anatomy to feel threatened, endangered by, thick-muscled and in danger of, iridescent over, and in the tissue between floodplains and the officer's science, and the quiet between and want for shade, the hooded eyes and fluid body, gentle body for whom I lie down. Tonight, I walk the dog, committing to memory the darkened color and shape of each car to pass. So it must have been for the first stars to harvest light from what they followed. I've placed a shotgun on layaway, a service I haven't used since I was 12, having unlearned to be ashamed of needing time or not knowing how to use it, knowing the distinction harbored in the officer's heart, perceiving it through its disciplinary veils. The horse stamps out from waxy brush, viral smell in the cuts up her thighs. Tell me, baby duck, your wrecked, unsleeping door. Love, if you are where I am, even your smallest of errors, your most wrecked door, the rock faces are opened, the genres are all up for aerial eradication. To the 40-year-old fish, to the abundant bufflehead and ring-necked ducks drifting south across the sunset, I love you. Tyler mentioned that tomorrow there's a performance at Tucson MoCA, and it's from 5 poems that occur across the book that are all connected, and I'm going to start the first one right now. It begins with an epigraph from the writer Cristina Rivera Garza, which is, "In the beginning there was the we being the most intimate and also the most political form of accessing one's subjectivity." I have no idea what time it is. I'm just tiny myself, 7:24. Consequences upon arrival. The sharp calls advancing across the valley were no longer for us, or they would be again, but not yet, stretching yards and deserts in their wait. Though we could name the places and their capitals, we could pull a needle through every orifice long and small. Water falling is the sensual conflict of a heart split open. We felt for every boundary, adjacent to which neighboring vertebrates fed themselves. A simple degree toward the wrong coordinate and the moment could change completely, and the change would be thoroughly complete, would ring through the bones of our appearance, a thoroughly surrounding contraindicative pulse. The voices advancing, in some instances observing our fear, accelerated the physical expression of ours, publicly, in suggestive, incongruent thrusts. We slept through the engine braking, the conflicting night milk intrusions, woke morning after morning to swarms of fruit-sucking bees. They too on their way downriver to welcome the morning in a good way. Tender ensembles to articulate the water's edge. We woke to the doorframe at the edge of dunes, which we'd always believed was a metaphor. But there, ajar, along the sagged sand fencing, we said this with care, though the sagging was one of hostility. We said, someone should fix that. Little passed through the frame, the pussing stitches, the counter stitches, the stitched rosettes, tenderness surrounding their appearance, tenderness indicating an introduction, a growing necessity to debride. We followed our intentions, swaying soft with desire on the tails of the processions whose shoulders did not rise above the brush. Our intentions pleaded in such a way that our intentions could neither be challenged nor brought entirely to light, their tenderness veiled by the inversion of light. Doubt, our precise and technical transformation. Of all the things we didn't know, the most efficient way to release a dog's bite is to, we never would have guessed, put a finger in its ass. which demonstrates clearly the importance of context with regard to appropriate behavior. Context was what we waited for. These conflicts in passing accumulated in the moment for which we prepared. Though when it arrived, we were wet. We were wide-eyed and well-read, waiting. Readiness, we realized, was never the appropriate goal. I want to give a shout out to Amber Morningstar Byers here in the front row, who taught me that the most efficient way to release a dog's bite is to put a finger in its ass. I never would have known. So there's a poem I wrote in the book that when writing it, I thought I will probably never read this out loud. And I think Tucson is the only place that I would read it out loud. For Frances, because she said, one day maybe you'll write a poem about us. For a long time, she could make a living weaving dream catchers from paper beads and wild bird feathers in her birthplace, Agua Prieta. She could call from detention to remind me of my anniversary, of my wife's birthday, weeks before the fact. I'd say, whose birthday is it coming? But she was never wrong. In that life, she said, I must be patient with my daughter. Offered anything, she would say, I want my mom. In this life, she tells the police they're thugs. They're just like them, or cowards. She gets run out of the city where her mother says she must wait. Her mother says, you've been on the streets before. Injury pins each heart to the appropriate scale, and an injured heart doesn't step onto the same street twice. But the pigeons walk the city map missing whole feet or toes. She calls from the phone of the friend who sells tortillas, who works at a maquilladora and weekends sells baked goods from disposable bags. See the afternoon sweating. Here, a blue ring she holds to her eye. The hulled pomegranates have stained her chest. She returned to Agua Prieta to find the wall wrapped in foil by an artist, so that when the sun began to set, the distinctions disappeared. So that she said, oh, I think I see. And she said, growing up, it was never like this, though I ran through the wall to get home from school to the house I was born in, to go from that home to be with my mom when the wall was a fence or a joke we used to get home faster. And her shoulder was restless against my shoulder, and we walked to the store for a Coke. In the background, the officers dragged old tires across the sand. In this foreign city, the population is small. Very few spend money on beads and pigeon feathers. She takes care of a man. It is the same job her mother does. She walks the dogs, cleans out the fridge, which nearly gives him a heart attack. The dogs he named Pandemia y Pandemia. Me habrías mirado, he says to her, the geriatric coyote. She responds with a joke. Quote, this could be confusing. This is not a quote from Frances. This is a quote from Mary Pratt Brady. Quote, the child, as currently conceptualized, is scalar force made productive, and who can have access to the protection of childhood remains central to the articulation of racializing economies of governmentality, and it has similarly relied on a practice of shredding affective relations to build and maintain a labor force, end quote. Mary Pratt Brady, Scales of Captivity, Racial Capitalism, and the Latinx Child. A white mother sets the scale for injury. Demeter raided the earth, fields scorched in her agony, while another woman's grief doesn't manifest in economic-ological devastation, but is compounded by it. The concentrations of displaced labor, dust under the door, American factories, IMF relief. Demeter had the privilege to be overcome. She had a lover god and groves and men to absorb her hunger. The Demeter coyote. In a land of vaginas where you have but one, your country must be small, too small to move within. The daughter coyote. I know I must be patient with this nation. The agent coyote. This is the joke. Your life isn't special or imminent except in the inch of land before you will be assaulted. It doesn't matter where you grew up from age 2 and went to school and birthed your baby, still you have to go home, or at least not here. Her every attempt to return has been documented. The lawyer pushes worn folders across his desk. Hermes in a men's warehouse suit. He says, the Ninth Circuit has been consistent. The lawyer god, the ox-eyed god, god of shields, those of lesser stature. How many gods are needed to articulate the economy of death? And the women turned to fountains, bone dry. The women breathing, rust overtaken. The callipy coyote, in conditions of violence in spite of their very specific design. The geriatric coyote, you'll leave like the others do. The Persephone coyote, I emerged in the rains shaken, the other way around. Though we arrive at once, we take joy alone. And in that aloneness, I love her. Driving with my dog along the border, I remember a line from the lawyer's file, and I could hear her in my head. The steel beams ticked by. It was because I wanted to be with my mom. The governing scale, the nation-contoured wilderness from which, at the end of the day, I drive myself home. The regulatory scale, that her daughter would slap her in a room of polycarbonate mirrors and women. The limited scale. I said, well, 4 hours is a long drive. It was the one time she's looked at me like that. Quote, scale is also a powerful epistemological form, neither neutral nor transparent, and Western imaginary organizes an understanding of spatial and social relations that is as the merely logical way to describe being in place, and spatial scaling demonstrates the shaping, capturing force of scale. Mary Pat Brady, Scales of Captivity, Racial Capitalism, and the Latinx Child. Pandemia y pandemia consume what's left of the coffee and what was intended for lunch. The Persephone coyote. The century rings into its own jagged ear. The geriatric coyote offers to buy ice cream when his government check comes in. It arrives to the nephew who operates a rancho outside of town. Though Demeter was encouraged by her lover god to look generously on their daughter's situation, she slaughtered the cattle and farmers alike. Rivers lifted their heads in love for her, raised the young girl's torn girdle in their streams. Where is the evidence of brutality and threat? Is the line that emerges where accountability will not? The geriatric coyote. I know they haven't been paying you. Occasionally, the old man has friends. Those afternoons, they lift coca to his face behind the door. Who am I to say, she says, what an old man in diapers can do? Her mother wakes directly across the border, in Douglas, Arizona, which some mornings could be the world's opposite end. She goes to work, raises her granddaughter who wishes to be a nurse. The mother coyote. What will you do when I'm not here? Okay, she says. Do that. Consequences upon arrival, 2. We woke into the morning undressed, every thought washed of color and their chains rusted over. Wind howled and fell and whispered beneath the brush, and we with it, bottoming on purpose. But that was not our gift. Without softness, without thesis, it was difficult to understand the reach of the occasion or to whom we owed the honor. Our only meaningful thought flooded crevices of pain, pain that was simple, fundamental as the air before rain. The circumstances formed around our suffering decayed from the point of initiation inward. This, so abandonment became common. We trained our ears to wake and comprehend the hour, deliver oxygen, rest one foot in its light. We rose our heads only to say fuck learnedness, behavior that could only exist in the mouth acquired by failure. Articulate and reform the needle drawn up into the roof of its suffering. We weren't going back. Not one night, we said, to that disease-shaded landscape, that pus in sheep's clothing, though desire was tied to its awning. Context required no record, met us squarely in our eyes. The eye that awned, the loud, immeasurable eye, the eye hugging the feet of our failure required a trust that could only be offered between streams, or given in the rivers that fed themselves. We woke with dreams pulled through a fine, intelligent point. This thorn was a fundamental characteristic of our sides. History was outlined in our ruin of stitches, rescaled specifically as though we weren't there. Language returned through the appearance of clouds, furtive, deeply shadowed and offering nothing. We stood adjacent, looked up, and rubbed our arms. While not offensive, it's inappropriate to remain in the procession and offer nothing. Not shade, no rosettes, no part in restoring the fence, neither the most obvious, rain. We should start a committee, someone said, the committee to combat language that does not offer rain, of which the goals and bylaws would be as erotic as they were without a single tooth. We woke to vandalism relative to the committee. Some ones, it seemed, were, in their quiet nighttime way, against what they interpreted as the public shaming of non-productive existence. For the first time in memory, accountability was on the table. It was bulbous and moist. It absorbed all of the blame, which was not at all called for. It said, I have introduced ideological context. I ruined the stitches. I don't feel seen. I'm absorbed by failure. I drink from the river and feel nothing. My gaze depletes. It is me to whom you owe great honor. I grew up either on or around, at all times, military installations, and this is a poem about that. If skin passes always through language, texture is compelled by desire. If one scar rots the length of an afternoon, then morning opens our chest to another science, delicately scaled, veined in silence. I rest my head on the frame of a burning question, and the future bends down from its fine-grained neck, breathing. The dominant orientation is based in devotion. The geography, devoted, disfigures each wrist. Veins negotiate a well-marbled music of territory. Militant roots open to the half-drawn beauty of corridors where the governing image branches with light. Devastating. Light passes through a moment which doesn't mean the moment ends. The moment continues with clarity. We therefore will call our transformations darkness, the proposals for which being precise and drawn toward the heart. I release a trigger and rounds emerge, pale wounds from the berm. Even this sound our valley impresses. Even the futures of thorned perennials bend. Always underneath it, I want language for what the government did to my body. The officers watched lengths of our street. Our legs were barely covered, our streets closed and opened to frame the process of intimate regard. Arousing, delicately lobed, bare repulsion blossoming anything you might ask for. We studied the houses from their ugly numbered orifices, the same in Panama, Kentucky, as no contractor ever had another idea. Hypothetically, I raised my hand. A bruise withdrawn from the door, jammed with heat. Heat of a particular style, forced open. Devastating. The hanging weight. Concerts of landlessness rehearsed in lesioned blooms, their fruit never fully introduced. Listen to the territory open the bright, hot door. Daily we waited at the barricaded roads, the tinted glass of half-drawn windows, having always to be reminded, if you don't stop smiling, I swear. We watched for the forms through which understanding passed, proxy to the conditions from which it emerged, drawing intelligence. Such a simple thing. Every story holds a collective body, amorously or otherwise. The name lost arrives under the knees of an idea. No, we're going to do it this way. We're going to fill our lungs up with the darkest juice. Walking to the corner store on behalf of so-and-so, drenched in possibility, we shaded our curious faces. The increasing aftermath of repulsion is arrival, is a third-party contract, and every nigga left holding the bag. One impression restrained, another will assume the terminal point. When we reference this hour, it holds no reward, nor does it face away. The fibrous connective tissue mounts. Our eyes nearly covered, our legs cold, we woke with the straightforwardness of being Black, regardless of what happened after. the order's warm, retching fever of it is how scale emerges. If a sentence passes always through landscape, and that landscape is not vacant, texture by this sentence forms a discursive core. Psychologically, physiologically, this scar along my thigh, and from being broken, a science, this murderous clarity we cannot withstand. Listen, how the officers have paused for the territory to arrive. The darker the berry, the longer there is to wait. Consequences upon arrival, 3. We will ask you to welcome what arrives. We embrace it ourselves, having never seen its raw or rotund form. Acceptance is an orientation, mapped along the consciousness that rises in our sleep toward the faceless choice that does not return us here. The old conflicts emerge through the feet of the new conflicts, marks across our bodies branched, all the ways there are to stand in one place, on a mountain at the bus stop, offering a single ragged fruit. A visceral redding eye, context arrived without horizon, lowered by an octave, shot through with feeling and mourning from every hole. A reservoir to one side, the context arrived with an animal in its mouth. It further proposed the geography. To foil the context was to outrun the authorities' imagination, and to refuse all explanations of why what we felt was not real. To disarm the wolf every time at every gate, unthread its learnedness and don the lonely pelt. Scale intimacy like a door, the ambient condition clawing along the rails. The same bird never appeared twice. Figures disappeared beneath terms and stones under which, overturned, there was always a little scat. It wasn't not beautiful. But the climates might surrender us, saying only, I'm sorry for the way I am. There were the climates from which we were evacuated, the climates for which authorities could give two fucks, in which we could not walk to the store, the dawning climate that was not a horizon but virus steeped inside our bones, the circulatory climates where we were perpetually inappropriately dressed. Contextual differences didn't occur within the interior. There were no climates within the climates. They occasioned equivalent decay. This too wished for a name. Dilation to demonstrate the needle's fine circuitous route, to give respect where respect was due. We produced gestures to anchor its teeth to our tables, direct its ankles to the comfort of our love. Faceless and ragged, the conditions behaved strangely, we like to say, though in fact it was duplicitously. The conditions behaved duplicitously, but required all our love. We clenched our fists, yet said, have the champagne. We are figuratively accountable here. Let us run to the store. Have leather, eames, and designer floors, designer flowers. The gun cabinet is designed accordingly, lovingly custom to order here. Allow us to regard the hour. Dominant orientation lights a corridor wide as Mexico's northern border. Upon return, everything left was unopened, consumed by humans, destroyed by humans, or animalized. One hopes the bees, hiving, dying in foul-smelling clumps, are not Africanized. The increasing aftermath of invasion. The wounds, amber overtaken, near lovely in the morning. The first recorded dead remained unidentifiable to the officers, lost to exposure. What to do with a Negro in the desert, or all of them after? In dry orchards out of season, among cotton, saguaro picked by wrens. Exposure precedes the realization of an identity or fact. State of being exposed to contact with something else, even when making very little noise. The soldiers, pissing behind creosote or elegant on their horses lined to enter the corral, entering each morning before the mountain silhouettes, a cold hand to unlace the erroneous and unfortunately pussing stitch, the hand incorporated along emotional fields of decay. The chain choy of fruit, then fall. Soil in Sonora softens according to the rain, offering every explanation in full without saying shit, without gentleness or stepping back from the officer's science, or from how white supremacist they really are. At the center of the explanation sits a small box, and to this box the beetle larvae arrive to feed. Among legal understandings of natural life in the United States is the sentence, as in for the length of one's natural life. There, standing, the distance of their body to a door cracked alone in the desert, irrefutable music. The sentence of natural life, unlike the sentence of life, doesn't allow for the possibility of parole, which was anyway discontinued in Arizona in 1993, when the possibility of parole was replaced with that of release, a process which remains judicially vague. Among peoples in the United States, indigenous peoples are incarcerated at the highest rates per capita. Among Blacks, the carceral industry, regardless the branching of orchards and centuries of trees, finds its critical mass. Every sentence harbors a unique end. That is its gift. Night opens a jagged scar. Soft purple signals the end of night in southern Arizona. Tree frogs retreat in the depths of winter. Their bodies appear lifeless, as do certain moths that avoid internal freezing by purging their guts. After the last music, a man, then unidentified, found fully flushed condition code 1, from which water flows north, probable electrocution located in a database of migrant deaths. His coordinates crossed by desert jaguars reliant on streams. His coordinates are passed through the beetle's gentle bowels, and those of the Bell's Vireo, identified by a two-part structure, his definitive response and water down his slender grayed breast. Beneath the cottonwood's gold-filtered crown, where the lowland leopard frog remains moist, the large cat's paw print remains fresh in the soil. After the last music, Tubman and Whitney hike Brown Canyon. They spot a rare beardless tyrannulet. Did she appear from nowhere, hugging parched northern boundaries of her species range? A Mexican jaguar treads backward to observe her melancholic refrain. It's without their interest that the Department of Interior studies effects of stress and fire on vegetation via high-rise, high-res satellite phenomics. No two droughts are alike. The earliest Negro recorded dead in Arizona was unidentified, having not survived probable hypothermia, exposure, blunt force. Force accumulates behind the skull to bear centuries of afterlife and pulp. The afterlife of being chatteled, of being made a glorified mercenary or buffoon, hanging naked in the moon's light where there is no substitute for the adjunct feeling, coerced into foul-smelling clumps. Let's say the force requires a hand, or an industry, at whatever temperature, more land. Let's say some records are not good, or the pulp is blooming, and the hands they return not destroyed exactly, but smelling lonely and of death. Consequences upon arrival, 4. We stood in recognition of our particular form, where in times of crises the tributaries, osseous and moaning, converge to enter dry ground, against abandonment, orchards, against analysis, astonishing gorges, well-coated seed. But the democratizing force, it was said, is the terror that will always reach you. No matter how withdrawn the cavity or breath, there's always something to work with and to refuse a scar. The voices who said this would then disappear. Poof, released across trails of afternoon light. The thesis was unrecognizable, fields in its only color, mountains eroded to their rims. This had sexual connotations, and actually several forms took place. Luxurious, invasive, with byproducts that remained distant and nearly impossible to drain. Valleys blurred, made critical the hours that fed only from their depressions, that did not regard learnedness or rest in its light. We observed the cleft faces, the conditions under which each depression was an appropriate place to look, the the sustainable valleys, evident in their fortitude, the unburdened valleys multiplied into themselves once filled to their rims, the gorged organic valley, the trampled valley, the bastard valley, the valley without proper circulation, without forms that could speak to its diminishing alterity even when the alterity was most observed to be diminished. Unlike the openings of animals with 4 legs or 2, any preparation obliterated the contents with light. Stepping out from the orifices, a voice called to us saying, to arrive everywhere from nowhere is the one true gift. Thus, we didn't understand those who were happy to trade their whole consciousness for a luminous horizon with its clumps and diffusions of literal prison, for a well-battered corpse, yet each day its anatomy and consequences grew. I hadn't thought about reading this one, but I think that I will. The Zen garden is nice on the weekends, but the door will lock behind you. This is a poem about visiting the VA hospital in Phoenix. Here we are all thinking and not thinking about being dead. We fight the dogs from our shoelaces and from each other by holding their well-decorated vests. This place is full of bitches, though you can't say that, though you're a person rightfully pissed off. We don't all want to be heroes. We don't all want to not die, except for this country, we don't want to die for that. Leaving curved impressions, germinal with no expectation in return. Leaving room to acknowledge capitalist patriarchy's broad and coercive applications. However meager or capacious the desire, our statistics are inevitably abused. Asked again whether I've considered hurting myself or others ever or in the past 2 weeks, I make a joke about the future, whose companion story dreams itself in the obstacles budding across every new path to love. It's that no path to forgiveness would look like this. I say, I'm sorry, I know, this isn't funny, but is also a testimony to the enormous thing we do to the extent we are able. Forgiveness from who? Came a voice from across the room. How long does it take? If nothing was cut or crushed, but the day hangs from jangling hooks above your sorry yellowing head. 3 weeks into the prescription, I woke thinking this is what it feels like to be white. No one disagreed. It didn't make any sense anyway, it didn't last. The official formulas for suffering are mostly subjective. I've accepted that I am one who will never suffer enough, a position both intentionally obscuring and clear. A quote from Ruth Wilson Gilmore. The United States was conceived in slavery and christened by genocide. These early practices established high expectations of state aggression against enemies of the national purpose, such as revolutionary slaves and indigenous peoples, and served as the crucible for development of a military culture that valorized armed men in uniform as the nation's true sacrificial subjects, end quote. None of the signs say thank you for your left arm, or hearing, or lymphatic health, or land. I want to thank you for being alive. And thank you, unfortunately, when it isn't what you want to be. Thanks, down to the lines creasing your deeply infatuated head. I wanted to volunteer for the Vets Against War crisis hotline. Then I didn't write back or attend any medical appointments that year. I'm disappointed by the cadence of paltry confessions I make in order to keep living. Later, in the rooms where we can speak, we want to know why do we feel so emotional. I'm going to read a happy poem now. The revolution will not be televised, yet she turns from the horizon and is waving hello. What rises first in the wilderness internal to love? Coming upon a cop vehicle on fire, the question is where to linger. when to return my eyes. In light of the most beautiful horizon, sleeping with heat by your side, position everything always the same way. The Glock, the cock, the pillow spray in well-spaced formation, always the same order. The key is to continue with clarity. I stay ready, so I don't never got to get ready, an old friend would say. But he was talking about film, visual aesthetics. Here, the bewildered underlying. Every light on but all the rooms. I don't never keep. I don't never quickly. I say, what is it that arrives in you? Progressive muscle relaxation, then I just. Another worn penny for the sex that doesn't come. Another mountainside of desert poppies. Scorched slope of the future that won't return and is indiscernible from the center of my hand. When I get out of bed, the air conditioner still isn't working. And Mingus on vinyl and I demonstrating how to best scramble soft eggs. Consequences upon arrival. 5. Refuge is born in the decision to not die, and to not fight either in that fatal schema anymore. We arrived at a breathless edge, an unfortunate relationship to the world. Gnarling roots evacuated of verbal expression, survival void of expression that was yet impolite. The explanations were acceptable, and the desert unstoppably green. Still, old feelings raised their eyes from the dirt. From the ongoing question, which brushed our arms in velveteen breaths, rose the pain of knowing our hope remained intact, given a language to love us, balanced between a basic set of possibilities and our choice at any moment to take a back way home. Each said, that I have been so secluded, I held defeat as my own, is the culminating authorial point. Unnamed in occasions of inconsistent bruising, internally consequential terror, consequences never not in season, at our fingertips, on tap, unoccupied, romantically unengaged, sleepless against the wet earth, a lush-eyed animal looking forward with ragged breasts. What happened after that? Memories terminated before our private shelter of consciousness, flesh sound over hoof over hand, marble in the gray-pink sky, an impression that carried no heat, though its promise was physical. To be perfectly happy and not strangers to ourselves. Its promise that it would find its way back somehow. We gathered around simulations of the future, oily skin pulling away from the skull, a tenderness looking back through crepuscular hours. Is this the place? The simulation of eating a meal together, with tears in our eyes, carrying on. Come now. The question rises in everyone. From the base of the neck, the world opens, veiled, receptive, just like that. The territories we've left behind are all gone now. The rain falls through them, refracting light. Thank you.
One more big round of applause for Saretta Morgan. I hope you'll join us tomorrow at 6 o'clock at MoCA for the performance. That's a free performance at MoCA. And again, as we described, it's going to be the polyphonic version of some of what we heard tonight. So come back for that. April 4th, we'll be back here at the Poetry Center with the event with Ofelia Zepeda, Amberly Ortega, and Chuksuvak Fullwider here at the Poetry Center. I want to make sure you know that books are for sale and that they're all over here. And I hope you'll head that way next and go buy a book and then come up and meet Saretta, and I'm sure she'll be happy to sign them. Thanks again for being here. Thanks again to Saretta for a beautiful reading. So.